you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am the Wiz! And I'm here to review the 1981 drama Mommie Dearest, starring Faye Dunaway, Diana Scalwad, and Steve Forrest, directed by Frank Perry. There are some films that are legendary. We can talk about Citizen Kane, Star Wars, Apocalypse Now, movies that have gone on to be big movies but had big stories behind them, how they were made, the obstacles they had to go through. Jaws is a big example of this, of a production that was so bad people thought it was going to be a disaster, and it turned out to be a really good movie. And then there are the opposite legends, the ones that are just so bad people wonder how in the hell did it get made this way. Talking about Ishtar, Catwoman, From Justin to Kelly. Oh my god, do not watch that movie. It is so bad. But one movie that seems to be divisive as to what the quality of it is the movie that we're watching today, which is Mommie Dearest. I have read articles where some just trash this movie, but there are others who defend this movie as either a very good movie or a camp classic. I was really curious as to how I was going to think about this movie, so I felt like I had to watch this movie just to check it out. So let's get into the review of Mommie Dearest, directed by Frank Perry, but before that, let's get into the plot. Joan Crawford, played by Faye Dunaway, is pretty unhappy in her life, even though she is very successful professionally. She then decides that she wants children, but because she can't get it from an agency, she decides to adopt 2 orphans from a black market ring, which one she names Christina, who is played by, as a kid, Mara Hobel, and as an adult, Diana Scalwad. At first, Joan and the kids seem happy, but as the film goes on, you get to see that she abuses alcohol and starts to be incredibly abusive to her kids, specifically Christina. Alright, well, that is the plot. Let's get into my 3 points, and my first point is, holy crap, is Faye Dunaway overacting in this movie. I gotta say, she turned whatever register she needed up to like 12 in this movie, because oh my god, this woman is loud as hell. This is gonna be really hard, because I understand why people actually praise her performance. It's very loud, it's bombastic, and she just goes for it in every scene. And honestly, it is scenery chewing. But I kind of get why some people do praise this, because she is really giving it her all. I think she is taking the production of this movie, which I will get to about how bad it is, and trying to will it to life into a much bigger movie. I'll say this. I get why she doesn't want to talk about this movie at all, because I don't think the fault of this movie and what makes it bad is from her. I think it's much deeper than anything on screen. I will say this. It is entertaining to watch her work in this movie, even though I think it does not work at all. But there are bigger issues with this movie that I have. So I think if you just want to watch a performance that goes nuts, Faye Dunaway's is definitely it. And my second point, the rest of the actors are underacting. I gotta tell you, it felt like the rest of the actors were in a completely different movie than Faye Dunaway, because here is Faye Dunaway just going absolutely bonkers, and then the rest of them are like this, and very monotone in certain circumstances, including Christina, both as a child and an adult. It just seemed like that everybody had their levels at like a 5, when Faye Dunaway had her at a 12, and it just is really odd to watch them all work together in this movie. Here you have Faye Dunaway just giving it her all. It seems like everyone else is falling asleep in this movie, and it's incredibly distracting at times to watch this. But I will say this again, I don't think this is the fault of the actors in this movie. If you were to ask me, are these good actors, I would probably say no. But I think this was in the fault of the director in this movie. But when you mix it together with Faye Dunaway's performance and everyone else, there is a really odd way that this film is working. I think the rest of the cast is underacting to a criminal degree in this. And my third point, the script is hilariously bad. I was stunned by how bad the dialogue in this is. There are some people who seem to think that the writers and the director decided to make this into a Joan Crawford film. Even though my only film that I've seen that I can remember is, honestly, Mildred Pierce, which I just watched on Tuesday. I get where they're coming from a little bit, because the way that this film is, it feels like it's set in the 80s. But it's set like in the 40s and the 50s. Like, it's really weird, because I just couldn't get a hold of the time period in this movie. I think that's a little bit of the fault of the writing here. But I will say this, The script, when it comes to dialogue, is awful in this movie. But there are scenes, especially with Christina in this film, where it just feels like the writer of the book, which is Christina, where it just seems like she wrote the children through the mindset of an adult, but the adult didn't have the foresight to say, I don't think this is how kids talk. There's a lot of dialogue in the movie where Christina is talking as a child, and she sounds more like a young adult, and it just feels really odd. And honestly, it really contributes to what I think is probably one of the worst things about this movie. And it's not something I'm going to get into my 3 points, unfortunately, but the dialogue in this movie, the script is just so poor. It is so bad. I think the terrible dialogue is where I think a lot of people derive all of its comedy in this movie, which really should not be there. Okay, let's get into the footnotes here. And I think the footnotes are going to be a little more detailed here. And my first footnote is I never thought I'd watch a movie that made child abuse funny. Now, this is not what the intended purpose of the movie was. It was intended for you to feel bad about Christina and her getting hit and abused emotionally and physically by Joan Crawford. But the way that the film shoots these scenes and performs them are so outlandish, and the dialogue is so bad, I could not help but laugh, especially in the wire hanger scene. I was howling with laughter watching this, going, what am I watching? And some people will look at it and go, well, then you enjoyed yourself. Not really. I was laughing at how terrible this was, and after that, I was like, how do you make a film where I am laughing at a poor girl getting beaten by a wire hanger? What is going on in this movie? It really just failed to make me feel bad about Christina in this movie. And that's terrible, because kids being abused is probably one of the easiest ways to garner sympathy for a child in a movie. The easiest way. And somehow this movie made it hard. Well, if you haven't guessed, overall, I absolutely hate Mommie Dearest. I think this was a terrible movie. But here's the thing. I kind of get why some people enjoy this. I can understand why people defend Faye Dunaway's performance in this movie. I think it's way too much. But with what she's working with, I kind of understand why she went that route, even though I found some of the scenes way too funny. The scene of her running is just uproarious in a way that it shouldn't be. But when it comes to the supporting cast, it just seems like everyone else is in a completely different movie. And that's a big problem when you have someone who's chewing the scenery as much as Faye Dunaway is in this movie. But really, I think all the blame lies on the director, Frank Perry, the producers, the writers, and the editors. I think they screwed this movie up so terribly. I think it's so bad at this point that I don't believe anything that happened in this movie. But I don't think that's entirely the fault of the writer of the book, even though that's got some controversy and people do tend to question the veracity of that book as well. But if you were to watch this movie and make your judgment, I can completely understand why someone would go, I doubt any of this would have happened. This is so outlandish. This is so stupid. Oh my god. But I know that there are some people who defend this movie. And it's strange because I understand it. I understand why some would defend this movie in a way. But I gotta be honest, overall, I absolutely hate this film. I think it's abhorrent. And again, if you take one of the easiest ways to garner sympathy for a child, which is them being abused, and somehow make it funny, but not on purpose. I don't think anyone would ever make child abuse funny on purpose. So let me disabuse that. But you were able to make that funny just by how poorly you constructed the scene and how it was performed. You really did a disservice. So overall, I absolutely hate Mommie Dearest. But again, there are people who defend this movie, so I don't know. I get it to a certain extent, but I can't. I absolutely hate this movie. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.